Okay, so this is our first module where we really try to dig deeper. We've looked at some of the overall topics in the course and some of the guests that we're going to feature, so you hopefully have a good sense of the arc of the thing, but now we want to start here in week 2 with a kind of closer look at an issue that I suspect anybody taking this course was prepared to deal with and expecting to deal with. That is the issue of eating animals and its kind of ethical salience or ethical features. Why do we focus on eating animals? Why is that a topic that immediately comes up when you think about the ethics of eating? Well, for one thing, we eat a lot of animals. We human beings are also animals, but we eat non-human animals in very high numbers. So these numbers are vague, but it looks like in the United States, 8 billion, with a B, land animals per year are raised and consumed. Add to that around 20 billion sea creatures, which are raised, consumed, or die as a result of byproduct. So the kind of things that can't be eaten but are thrown back into the sea and ultimately die when we're trying to catch fish that we can eat. So that's the US, 8 billion and around 20-some billion. Take the whole world and it goes up to, recent figures suggest, around 56 billion land animals. So that's pigs, turkeys, chickens, in some cultures dogs, cats, cows, of course. And then I don't have the figures exact for the sea creatures because they're hard to get, but let's assume there's at least another 50 billion of those. So let's say 100 billion. 100 billion animals, non-human animals, are produced, consumed, killed in some way for our eating practices and purposes each year. Okay, that's a lot of animals, and it's a huge portion of our food system and of our diet for most people. Only 5% of Americans are vegetarians. Something like 0.5% of Americans are vegans. Many people who become vegetarians or vegans don't stick with it for various reasons. So we all, almost all of us, have or do consume animal products for food. That's one reason why we should think about whether there are any ethical aspects to the eating of animals. Another main and obvious reason is that animals are like us in certain important ways. I mean, we think that animals we know that they have a central nervous system that's very similar to ours. We, of course, are animals too, and we all come from common ancestors. And so we suspect, quite reasonably, that animals feel certain kinds of pain and maybe higher level forms of suffering. Now, there were some philosophers in the period that I study, the Enlightenment, who thought that feeling and sensation only comes through the soul, and that the soul is this kind of extra immaterial thing that God infuses into a brain. And so if you don't have God infusing the brain with a soul, then you're not going to have any sensations or feelings. And so they famously thought that animals were just kind of advanced machines who just had bodies and no souls, and even tried to prove that they believed this in the case of one 17th century philosopher by kicking a pregnant cat around and saying that even though it was screaming and apparently in great pain, he didn't feel bad at all because he knew that it didn't have any sensations or feelings. Okay. That's one view. If you don't hold that view, then you probably think that animals have something like sensory pain facilities, C fibers firing in the brain, and perhaps certain higher level forms of suffering as well. So then the question is, when we're taking these 100 billion animals and using them for food, are we causing them pain? And if we are, is that pain sort of morally or ethically relevant? Do we need to take it into account? Is it something that should give us pause as we think about all these animals that we consume? Is it something that should stop us from eating certain kinds of animals or killing or treating or raising or disposing of them in certain kinds of ways? So the sentience issue is kind of fundamental when we think about the ethics of eating animals. A couple of other issues that come to mind and that we'll talk about are health concerns and environmental concerns. So health concerns, it looks as though increasingly People are suggesting, and we'll hear from different nutritionists who have different views, but people are suggesting that eating animal products is either unnecessary for a full flourishing human diet, or at least should be cut way down in order for us to stay healthy and avoid the kind of obesity epidemic that we see in developed nations where there's a lot of animal products around. So there's health issues to consider, and those are in some sense ethical issues. We want to think about what sorts of people we want to be. Do we want to cultivate our own health and the health of our families and those around us? And we'll also consider environmental issues. So one of the main arguments against certain ways of farming animals and producing animals is that there are these externalities, as economists call them, these things that we don't really take into account when we consider the actual practice involved, like runoff into lagoons, which then end up in the water system of a bunch of manure that all these animals are producing, or the methane gas that comes from cows and is 20 times worse as a greenhouse gas than the kind of stuff that's coming out of your car. So we want to look at some of the ethical issues related to animal production as it relates to health and environment, as well as animal welfare and animal pain and suffering issues. So that's our project for this unit.